Hi, and welcome to Jam-Packed Business Made Easy. My name is Jam Anderson, and I'm the CEO of Jam AI. And today, we're practicing exactly what we teach. You're about to listen to a podcast that's truly automated with our AI hosts, who are now our new friends. We also would like to invite you to listen to our podcasts that come out every Friday, where Flora is interviewing entrepreneurs just like you. We're exploring authentic challenges and discovering practical solutions together. Speaking of community, if you're looking for a community, you can find us on the School platform. Just search for the #1 community for entrepreneurs. All right, let's dive in.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've got quite a stack of articles today, and they're all circling around one big question in content creation. Why are we still just listing features when we really should be telling stories?
Exactly.
So our mission today is, well, to cut through the research and really understand how creative narrative and marketing psychology fit together.
It's a fascinating intersection.
Way too long. The go-to for selling stuff has been the spec sheet, right? Buy this car, 300 horsepower, use this software, 50 gigs of cloud storage.
Yeah, very functional, very dry.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So today we're diving in to figure out why that approach just makes you invisible now, and why selling, a transformation or a story or even a community, that's the only real way to get engagement and purchases these days.
And what's really interesting here is how content marketing sort of formalizes something ancient, really. Consumer decisions. They're almost never purely rational. If people bought things based on spreadsheets, only the absolute cheapest or most efficient product would ever win, right? But they don't. Decision-making is deeply emotional. It's driven by needs hiding underneath. And the sources we looked at, they make it crystal clear. Good content marketing is basically applied psychology.
Applied psychology.
Yeah, it's designed to get at those fundamental needs and, crucially, the emotional triggers that happen before someone decides to buy.
Okay, that flips the script immediately. So we're not selling horsepower anymore. We're selling the feeling of speed, maybe escape.
Right.
And if we're not selling storage, we're selling the peace of mind you get knowing your photos, your memories, they're safe.
Precisely. The underlying benefit, the emotional payoff.
All right, let's get into the power of narrative then. That emotional connection.
Okay.
So the sources, they define storytelling in marketing as, well, creating these emotional connections.
Yeah.
It's the thing that makes a brand stand out,
Yeah.
cuts through all the noise online and leaves a real lasting impression.
And there's science to back this up. If you look at brain scans, when people process just rational arguments, only the language bits light up. But when you tell a story, with a character, a challenge, suddenly the sensory parts, the movement parts, the emotion centers of the brain engage. We don't just hear the story, we kind of simulate the experience.
Wow. Okay, so it's much more immediate, more visceral.
Yeah.
The example that kept coming up was Coca-Cola's Share a Coke campaign.
Oh, yeah. Classic.
They didn't talk about the product's function at all, did they?
Yeah.
No debates on fizz levels. They just swapped the logo for, 150 common names?
That's it. Simple.
And they turned this mass-produced drink into something personal. A little social story about finding your name, connecting with friends. That personalized touch just blew past the usual advertising defenses.
It really did. But, there's a question here. Skeptics might say, well, Coke had a massive budget, huge distribution. Was it really the narrative? Does the data show the story was the main thing?
Yeah, it seems so, because the data backs up this idea that stories kind of bypass the critical calculating part of the brain. They tap straight into those fundamental psychological drivers. The sources show that when a story connects with who you want to be or the problems you desperately need to solve, you stop weighing the pros and cons so much.
You form an emotional bond instead.
Exactly. And that bond is apparently really tough for competitors to break.
It creates identity association. A feature is just data, a number. But a story offers an identity. It lets you imagine yourself as this better version of you using that product.
Right, like if you buy fancy climbing gear, you're not just buying rope strength.
No, you're buying the identity of the successful, adventurous climber. That's the real purchase.
Okay, so if we want to use narrative strategically, we need to know which psychological levers to pull.
Precisely. Consumer behavior is complex. Sure, perception, social proof, product knowledge, all that plays a role.
Right.
But for content marketing, the most powerful levers involve those deep-seated emotional drives and motivations.
So if emotion is the key, What are the specific levers the sources point to? The ones that really work for building narrative content. It can't just be about making people feel vaguely happy, right?
No, definitely not. The sources get very specific. They really zero in on 3 core emotional triggers that consistently drive consumer behavior and shape the stories we respond to.
Okay, what are they?
Belonging, aspiration, and fear.
Belonging, aspiration, and fear. Okay, belonging makes sense.
Yeah, belonging is foundational. It's the pull of community, shared values, fitting in, stories showing someone joining a group. Think of those early Apple ads with the creative misfits. They're powerful because they tap into that ancient human need for connection. We all want to belong somewhere.
Absolutely, an aspiration.
Yeah.
That's the transformation story, right?
Exactly. That's probably the biggest driver for, say, luxury goods or self-improvement stuff. You're selling the story of who the customer dreams of becoming, the after picture.
And the brand becomes the bridge.
The brand is the indispensable guide, the tool, the magic elixir that gets them from their current self to that idealized future self.
Okay, but the nuance you mentioned, fear, that one feels different. The source has really highlighted the power of negative emotions.
Yeah, it's kind of counterintuitive, isn't it? But
Yeah.
the data suggests content driven by emotions like fear or even anger or anxiety can have a really strong impact on, well, virality and buying decisions.
So how does that work strategically? It feels a bit risky.
It is high stakes. Fear is potent because it triggers immediate urgency, intense motivation. You're essentially selling the avoidance of a bad outcome.
Okay, like insurance ads or home security system.
Or even health products, yeah. Their stories often articulate the potential pain point, the negative consequence, maybe better than anyone else.
So the strategy isn't about ignoring negative feelings.
Not at all. It's about acknowledging them, maybe even amplifying them slightly, and then positioning the product or service as the clear resolution, the way to alleviate that fear.
Okay, so a smart narrative might actually start by highlighting a threat, a real pain point, making you feel that fear a bit, and then pivots quickly to position the brand as the solution. Leveraging fear, then offering the aspiration of relief or security. That's, yeah, powerful stuff.
Very.
All right, so if we agree emotion sells, and that aspiration, belonging, fear are these core levers, then just relying on, creative sparks feels a bit haphazard for a big brand.
Definitely irresponsible, yeah.
You need something repeatable, a story structure that can scale across different campaigns, different channels. This is where we get into the frameworks, right? The science part.
Absolutely. We're moving beyond just recognizing emotion and into actively engineering it in a way. The sources detail specific blueprints, these structured ways to make sure a brand story consistently lines up with that customer transformation we talked about.
Okay, what are the main ones?
Well, the most famous one is probably the hero's journey. Everyone sort of knows that one customer starts ordinary, faces trials, returns transformed with a reward.
Right, the classic Campbell structure.
Exactly. But 2 others mentioned are really critical for marketing and maybe less understood. The nested loop and the spark line.
Okay, nested loop and spark line. They sound a bit technical. Let's break those down. What exactly is a nested loop in a content marketing context?
Okay, so a nested loop is mainly about building suspense and holding attention, especially over longer content, like a presentation or maybe a detailed article.
How does it work?
You start a story that's the open loop. Get people invested. Then you deliberately pause that story to insert something else, maybe detailed information, a product demo, a rational argument. That's the inner loop.
Oh.
And then, crucially, you return to the original story to give the payoff, the resolution. You close the loop.
Okay, I can see that. So strategically, say a brand is doing a long webinar, they might start with a story about a customer facing this huge problem.
Yeah.
That's the open loop.
Yep.
Then they pivot to, say, 20 minutes of showing how the software works, the inner loop.
Right, the how-to.
And then they circle back to show how that software specifically solved the initial customer's problem, closing the loop.
Exactly. It keeps the audience hooked because they're waiting for that emotional resolution from the first story. It also helps manage cognitive load. You alternate between emotional engagement and information.
Clever.
Huh.
Okay, and what about the spark line? That sounds visual.
It is, fundamentally. It's about mapping the emotional arc of the narrative. The sources emphasize that effective stories don't just climb steadily upwards towards a happy ending.
Oh.
No, they need rhythm. They need a series of, let's say, small emotional low points, challenges, setbacks, moments of doubt mixed in with the high points, the small wins, the insights.
Why is that dip important?
Because if the emotional journey is just flat, people tune out. If it's just a constant rise, it feels fake, unbelievable. The dupes make the peaks feel earned and more satisfying. It mirrors life. Ups and downs.
And that makes immediate sense.
Yeah.
So if a company's making, say, a series of 5 short video ads, the Sparkline idea would suggest that maybe the third ad should show a moment of relatable struggle or frustration with the problem.
Exactly. Making the final transformation in the fifth ad feel much more powerful and emotionally resonant.
Got it. So whether it's the hero's journey, nested loop, or Sparkline, the core takeaway from the research seems consistent. The customer has to be the protagonist.
Always. They are the hero, facing the conflict, achieving the transformation. It's their story.
Which means the brand's role needs to be positioned carefully as the guide, the mentor, the magic tool.
Precisely. Never the star of the show. You're not selling the amazing sword, you're selling the hero's newfound ability to use the sword to beat the dragon.
So wrapping this section up, what does this all mean for actual strategy?
It means that really optimized content marketing takes these psychological insights, understanding what drives people emotionally, like aspiration or belonging, and marries them with these repeatable structures. You're not just describing what your product does. You're actively shaping a narrative about your customer's future identity and providing the emotional logic and the structural pathway that makes choosing your brand feel almost inevitable.
Wow. Okay, this deep dive really has pulled back the curtain on the emotional playbook of marketing, hasn't it?
It really has.
We've pretty clearly established that the real engine for engagement isn't the feature list. It's that emotional connection you build through story. Let's just quickly recap the 3 big strategic takeaways.
Good idea.
First, storytelling isn't just nice to have. It's essential. It's the mechanism for getting attention and creating that emotional hook that allows brands to actually be remembered in today's crowded markets.
Absolutely critical.
Second, the real purchase drivers aren't just vague feelings. They're specific psychological factors, especially those powerful triggers of aspiration, belonging, and yes, even the strategic use of fear.
Knowing those levers is key.
And finally, you need structure. Frameworks like the hero's journey, the nested loop, the Sparkline, they ensure your story is consistent, repeatable, and actually engineered to line up with the customer's emotional journey and desired transformation.
Structure makes the magic repeatable, basically.
Exactly.
And maybe as you go forward thinking about how to apply these really powerful tools, here's a final thought to chew on.
Yeah.
If these sources show pretty convincingly that negative emotions like fear or even anger can boost content sharing and strongly influence purchases,
Yeah.
how does that change how we think about ethical content creation?
That's a big question.
It is. Where exactly is the line between, say, helpfully motivating someone towards a needed solution and maybe genuine psychological manipulation, especially when you're using these very effective, deeply structured emotional tools? Finding that line, that's the real strategic and ethical challenge for every brand stepping into this emotional playbook.